Is a better world possible? The challenges sometimes seem overwhelming. Billions of people have no access to education, health care, clean drinking water, or even basic human rights. Their poverty is compounded by corruption, conflict over resources, economic stagnation, and violence.
Some countries, whole generations of young people are being lost.
So the cycle goes on and on. So one has to break that cycle.
Where are the solutions? And who are the change makers who can create them? In the past few decades, a powerful force has emerged. New leaders finding new ways to tackle the world's biggest problems. Problems that governments and businesses alone have not been able to overcome.
This is a new language, a new way of looking at the world. Very different structure, different framework, different reference points.
This global revolution is led by social entrepreneurs, innovative people who respond to local problems, engage their communities in solving them, and accelerate change.
What has happened during the last 5 years is breathtaking.
People have the power of transformation.
This series is an opportunity to learn from the most extraordinary social entrepreneurs, people whose visionary ideas and persistence have enabled millions to transform their own lives. These founding members of Ashoka's Global Academy for Social Entrepreneurship have lessons to offer us all about the power of our own potential. They all started small, from humble beginnings. You are invited to share their journeys, learn their insights, and about the tools they use to produce change.
We have a window of opportunity of a couple of years.
This is the chance that we have to think ahead. The companies that get this are going to have a huge competitive advantage.
Whether you're in business, the media, government, universities, or the social sector, this series will expose you to a new way of thinking and working that will stretch your own beliefs about what's possible and how you can achieve it. Mohammed Yunus created Grameen Bank, a bank tailored for poor people in response to crushing poverty in his newly created country of Bangladesh.
Poverty is not caused by the poor people. Poverty is caused by the system we built. Poverty is caused by the policies that we pursue.
Grameen Bank has made a significant contribution to reducing poverty in Bangladesh. Since Grameen's creation in the 1970s, life expectancy has risen more than 20 years. The fertility rate has been cut in half. It is estimated that each year, 200,000 Grameen members and their families escape poverty.
The question is, where do we end up? 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now? We did something wrong and the poverty is created. So let's do something right so that poverty disappears.
Dr. Yunus traces the growth of microfinance into a worldwide movement. He shares his vision for using it to meet the Millennium Development Goals and to create a poverty-free world. He describes what it will take from all of us to enable microfinance to reach its global potential.
To me, poor people are like a bonsai. Like the bonsai tree, little tree. You pick the seed of the tallest tree in the forest and then take the best seed out of that and plant it in a flower pot. You got a tiny little tree and call it a bonsai. Nothing wrong with the seed. We got the best seed possible. Nothing wrong with the tree because we picked the tallest tree in the forest. But actually it grows this far. Why? Because we put them into a flower pot, the base. Society is the base. And society is so stingy, it doesn't give them the poor people space to grow. So I said, change the base. If you change the base, anybody will be as tall as anybody else. My belief is poverty is not caused by the poor people. Poverty is caused by the system we built. Poverty is caused by the policies that we pursue. So if this is my conclusion, I have to prove that this is true. So I built Grameen Bank as an institution, a bank, but a different kind of bank. You say, there are banks. Why did you create another one? I said, this kind of bank doesn't exist. That bank created poverty. These banks get them out of poverty. We assume that some people will always remain poor. I'm always asked in Bangladesh, you talk about having a poverty-free world. Are you crazy? Even the richest country in the world, United States, they have poor people there. I said, look, no matter how rich you get in the present system, you'll have poor people. So I'm trying to change that system. And that system, there will be no poor people because people are as capable as anybody else. In a world where, which goes around with money, you cannot get $1 without $1 in your hand. To catch $1, you need $1. In the poor people, nobody gives the first $1 to catch the next $1. The starting point is missing. If you are born in a rich family, you already have lots of dollars to catch many more in your lifetime. And not only that, if you have a lot of dollars already, any bank will give you a lot more dollars to make it more, and you get more. So if you are on the ground level, you don't catch anything. So you become at service of everybody else. You offer your service, you earn your wage, earn to feed yourself, and that's it. You are not in the money-making world at all. In most of the third world countries, even that job, that's not available either. So they are forced out in the open to go fend for themselves, sell things, buy things, make money, informal sector as they call it. But they don't have the money. So they go to the money lenders. They borrow in the morning, pay back in the evening, pay 20% a day. That's the standard procedure in the world. Nobody notices that. Nobody wants to notice that. Everywhere, even the USA, the money lenders are there. Because no banking business, the formal business went in, banks defended themselves by saying that poor people are not creditworthy, that's why we are not going there. So today we have shown that they are creditworthy. So what is the excuse of not going and lending money? I call credit as a human right, and I've been insisting that this should be formally adopted as a human right. If you list all the human rights that has already been recognized, right to food, right to shelter, right to health, right to education, how do you get those rights established? Is the government coming in a silver platter, giving it to you, here is your food, here is your shelter, here is your education? I don't think any government exists which can do that for every citizen. The government's responsibility is to enable the person so that they can establish their own rights. And that becomes possible, and then creating that environment becomes simpler if we make the credit available. And if you ask me to put them in order of priority, all those rights, I'll put right to credit as a number one, right? Because that's where it all starts. If you can bring income, credit means creating self-employment right away. And if you can create instantaneous self-employment, if you can start earning income, then achieving other things becomes easier. Right to food, right to shelter, right to health, makes sense. It's very important that as you earn, you put a savings away. Savings is for something for future. It's a long-term asset building process. Do you have the capacity to cope with emergencies? Emergencies could be flood, a general emergency. It could be a personal emergency, somebody's sickness. And then you are building it up for future, like a pension fund. At old age, who is going to take care of you? You don't worry because you are building up your future. Traditionally, you think your son will take care of you, your daughter will take care of you, your relatives will take care of you. When day comes, maybe they all abandon you because they are so poor themselves, they cannot help you. So that is available to other people, privileged people, but it's not available to the poor people. In many countries, women cannot go and work. Even men can go become agricultural labor. Women, by tradition, by culture, are not capable of doing that. So they stay home, become dependent on men. When we began, we wanted to make sure half the borrowers of Grameen Bank are women. not even 1% of the borrowers of the conventional banks in Bangladesh happen to be women. So there must be something wrong in the system which kind of ignores half the population. And then we saw money going to the family through women brought so much more benefit to the family compared to the benefits coming to the family where money went through men. Women were very cautious with their money. They wanted to get the best mileage out of that money. If woman is making money, the children became immediate beneficiary. They went to school, they are better fed, they are better clothed. And women look for long-term issues, trying to get out of poverty much faster than a man does. So looking at many of these issues, we changed our policy of 50-50. We concentrated on women, we focused on women. And today, with 4 million borrowers in Grameen Bank, 96% are women. Grameen Bank has been studied a lot. I mean, lots of research institutions, universities, donor agencies. World Bank study tells that 5% of Grameen borrowers get out of poverty every year. And also, if you look at other studies, child mortality has declined by 37% in Grameen families. Nearly 100% of the Grameen children are in school. We measure our poverty progress, how you move out of poverty, by bringing 10 points in a checklist. If you have satisfied all those 10 points, you are out of poverty. One is housing, for example. It's whether you have a solid roof over your head and you have enough space inside of your home, and so that you can live in the family without worrying about winter and particularly rain in Bangladesh is a monsoon country. So this is one. And whether all your children are in school and staying in school in a steady way. So that's another one. Whether you have enough savings deposits in the bank, so that if you have a bank account, at least you know if you need money for emergency or a special reason, you have to, you can fall back on that money. And minimum balance should be 5,000 taka. So that's another point. Whether you have sanitary latrine, whether you have access to drinking water, pure drinking water. And if out of 10, 9 have been done, 1 is missing, we still do not consider you have crossed the poverty line. And in that estimation, 56% of the Grameen borrowers have moved out of poverty, which is quite a task. As we are running Grameen Bank, our issue always is poverty, always the children in those families and their food and so on. And agriculture was in the system right from the beginning. And we saw the opportunity of allowing all the non-functioning deep wells lying all over the country. So we thought, why don't we just take it from the government? So we started an irrigation project within Grameen Bank. And gradually we put it in a formal shape, call it Grameen Agricultural Foundation. It became an independent company. And similarly for fisheries, government wanted to give us lots of ponds. They couldn't run because their officials are very incapable of doing that kind of thing. So we took it over. And we created the Fisheries Foundation out of that, and still running as a Fisheries Foundation. And other companies like Grameen Energy, which is a solar energy company, selling solar panels all over the country. So in general, we have more than 24 such companies that we have created along the way. Now we are getting ready for healthcare. The healthcare is so important, so vital. And the healthcare service is so poor in the country. So we thought we must get in to try to build something which can reach out to the poorest. Even today, the children born in Bangladesh is born at home. As a result, Bangladesh is one of the top in child mortality and one of the top in the maternal mortality. And the Millennium Development Goal is to cut it down by 2015. Always, whatever company that we create with the name Grameen means it is for the poor. Grameen Phone is a big company and sells mobile phone service in the country. How is it that you benefit from that for the poor people? Either they benefit directly from that company or they will be owning that company. Like Grameen Bank is owned by the poor people. It's owned by the borrowers. Similarly, Grameen Phone, when it goes to the share market, those shares will go to the poor people. We'll make sure that the company is owned in large part owned by the poor people. So this is the way we see the scenario. Everything we have done, we see some reason that it will go into the benefiting the poor people. Grameen Bank became a piece of curiosity for people because we are saying things which nobody believed it could be done, lending money to poor people and getting it back, near 100% return of the money, particularly in third world countries and particularly in Bangladesh, where the tradition of agricultural banks giving loans, cooperative institutions giving loans, never coming back. That's the tradition. So they wanted to study, they wanted to come and find out how to do it. So the more and more of these people who wanted to do themselves, they became constant visitors trying to find out how to get things done. So we thought instead of doing it piecemeal, why don't we set up an organization who will specialize in this, helping other people to replicate Grameen Bank. So we set up an organization called Grameen Trust. So Grameen Trust's job is to provide all the technical assistance, provide training, provide funding if possible. And Peter Goldmark, just newly elected president of Rockefeller Foundation, provided the first chunk of money to come to Grameen Trust to start the funding of the potential replicators. Many of the very important microcredit programs around the world today actually started with Grameen Trust support with that kind of money, giving seed money and then moving from that stage to the next stage and so on. Today, more than 100 countries around the world have Grameen programs of one kind or another running there. So the idea has spread globally. So this became a very standard procedure. Each year the people will apply, they will send letters without knowing that such thing exists, and we say, why don't you come and join this Grameen Dialogue? And the newsletter that we also called the Grameen Dialogue became the instrument for keeping in touch with each other and discussing the issues at hand, policy issues, technical issues. So both Grameen Dialogue as a newsletter and Grameen Dialogue as a workshop method or exposure method has been very, very important in strengthening the movement of microcredit. I was in Beijing conference because of our experience by 1995. And people responded very well during the Beijing conference. We told our story, how microcredit works so much good in a more efficient way, bringing women into the income stream. And then leading to many other issues besides earning money, and political issues, and the family status of the children, or girl children, and so on, and improving the health of the children because mother is earning money and that helps the children better, and education of the children. And I must say that people paid a lot of attention to these issues. It brought the whole world to discuss and understand and review the policies, global policies, national policies towards women and gender issues. The decisions taken in Beijing conference still reverberates all over the world. We organized a microcredit summit in 1997, 2 years after Beijing, because we felt that microcredit is so good, but not too many people are aware of it. And not too many people are getting involved and making it available to everybody. We have demonstrated beyond anybody's doubt that it works in helping people to get out of poverty, number one, and it's sustainable, and it can work in all kinds of cultural and economic situations. But still people are not giving as much attention we hoped they would. So we thought we'll bring a world together. It's a whole issue of changing the mindset of the financial institutions, changing the mindsets of the donors, changing the minds of the government policymakers. So there we presented our case and tried to get their support, and together we arrived at a goal to reach 100 million poorest families with microcredit, preferably to the women in those families, by 2005. And we followed it up, year by year, month by month, what we are doing, how far we are doing, and we did a good progress. We will be very close to 100 million, if not exactly 100 million. So today, we are just around 100 million. Despite all the difficulties, all the skepticism, all the wrong policies, imagine if you had the right policies, imagine if you had all the support system installed, how far we could have gone. And now, we are discussing the Millennium Development Goal of 2015, reducing the number of poor people by half by 2015. No matter how you look at it, sooner or later you'll have to come to the financing of this business. So microcredit will again be an important issue to be discussed to make sure poor people have access to financial services. If we do not apply microcredit to reach the Millennium Development Goal, you may reach Millennium Development Goal, but not by 2015. It will be a very slow process, because without money, people will always find difficulty to pull themselves out of poverty. What else can you give to help poor people get out of poverty? Health, education, and so on. And growth of the economy. Growth of the economy doesn't immediately translate into getting poor people out. If we can bring the microcredit in the hands of the poor people, then they can take advantage of the growth. Growth, if you imagine growth as a flood, new flood, filling up all the canals and everything. But if the poor people don't have the boat, they will be drowned. The growth may drown them rather than make them float. So you need a boat for the poor people so that they can take advantage in the water in the canal and move in the economic destination wherever they want to go. So that's what the role of the microcredit is. At the conceptual level, what did we do wrong in our framework? We must have done something wrong in the framework, which led to all these conditions. One thing I have been emphasizing again and again, for example, in the issue of capitalism, there are things that, seeds that we have put in, which created the conditions of poverty right now. And this is no fault of capitalism itself. I think the whole thing began by the narrow interpretation of capitalism. For example, when we talk about businesses, we always imply, we always interpret businesses are the institutions which are designed to make money, and their only objective is to make money. So people took it very seriously. So they are in the businesses, they want to maximize their profit in a wholehearted way, a very concentrated way. We built supporting institutions to make it easy for them to get to the maximization of profit. In the way, we discarded all our social objectives of living in this planet. There, I think, we made the big mistake. Businesses could be two kinds, at least. Businesses to make money, maximization of profit, and other kinds of business to do good to people. And that could be as dynamic a business as anything else you can see in the market. And business to do good to people are the ones who are not running to make money, but they are run as a business, cover their cost. It's a kind of no-loss business. Two kinds of entrepreneurs can run pharmaceutical companies. One kind of entrepreneur will be running their business as best they can, as efficiently as they can, as productively as they can, to make money. And there could be another kind of entrepreneur, which I may call social business entrepreneur, but doesn't want to make money by selling medicine. He wants to bring medicine to the people so that they can cure themselves of diseases or prevent diseases before it happens, at the same time covering the cost. So that it's not a charity organization, it's a business organization. If we can bring in social business entrepreneur in every single businesses, the kind of poverty that we are talking about, the kind of problems we see in the market would gradually disappear, because the social business entrepreneurs will try to address it. Wherever the problem arises, they will get in. Governments have to play the most important role. Other parties like international finance organizations or donors can initiate, can do a very important job in opening up the path. But the real path making has to be done by the government. Government, first of all, should not get involved in delivering microcredit by themselves. That, I think, would be absolutely wrong policy. It should be open for private interventions and private investors or social business entrepreneurs. Government's intervention would be creating a favorable environment, supportive environment. Under the existing laws everywhere in the world, NGOs or private organizations are not allowed to give loans. If you give loans, you have to get a license. And all countries prohibit taking deposits from somebody unless you're a bank. As an NGO, you violate the law. In Bangladesh, regulatory bodies made a compromise, allowed the NGOs to take deposits from the borrowers, but stopped taking deposits from non-borrowers. So at least halfway compromise was done. In many countries around the world, even that is not allowed. So you cannot take deposits from your own borrowers, you cannot take deposits from outside. This has to be changed. I mean, if you're serious about ending poverty, you have to be serious about that. Those troubles could disappear right away if governments come and make a legislation to allow creation of microcredit banks, exactly the way microcredit works, so that it's now a banking entity, a formal entity, which can take deposits and lend money, so you don't have to look around for any money, because the money is available right there. You can take deposits and lend it out to the local people. So this is, I think, the most important task of the government. Unless that is done, microcredit will always limp. It cannot become a strong business to reach out to all the poor people everywhere. So this is the most important role the government can play, creating the environment for that. In order to facilitate the expansion of microcredit, in the absence of a regulatory body and in the absence of the legislation to create microcredit bank, one solution would be to create a wholesale fund, an intermediary body, who can borrow money, take donor money, pass it on to the microcredit lenders, the NGOs, MFIs, who can do the job on the ground. So that entity is very important, that intermediate entity which can provide the money. Because otherwise, individual microcredit program can spend 80-90% of their time chasing donors or somebody who can give the money. They can, unless you have the assurance of the money coming, you cannot plan your expansion, how many borrowers you want to reach out next month, next year, because you are not sure where the money will come from. And also that institution's wholesale fund can become a guarantee institution. If microcredit program is borrowing money from existing commercial banks and other financial institutions, they can provide the guarantee, so that even if the wholesale fund itself doesn't have enough money, they can become the intermediary between the financial institutions and the microcredit programs. Pakistan has done that. India has done that, but not from the government side, from the private side. They have created a wholesale fund. Uganda, they have done that. In Mexico, they have done a wholesale fund. So there are several countries that I see. But in many cases, the wholesale fund, since government sponsored it, is very bureaucratic and rigid. In order for a wholesale fund to be effective, I think keeping a distance from the political entities like the government is very important. And people who want to invest in microcredit programs as a social business entrepreneurs can use their money as a guarantee for the existing conventional banks to provide loans to the microcredit programs. So they can individually or collectively create some guarantee mechanism. Bangladesh is a very exceptional situation. Microcredit has gone a long way. Almost 80-90% of the poor families have been reached out with microcredit programs in Bangladesh. But if you look at other countries like India or China or Philippines, still a long way to go. So there, these mechanisms and wholesale funds are extremely important, and the role of the government is very important in creating the environment, legal environment, to facilitate the creation of microcredit banks and regulatory body. United Nations organizations, they have done some organizational workshops, conferences, and that sort of thing. UN can bring success stories and share with other countries, tell people why they feel that microcredit is important, like celebration of International Year of Microcredit in 2005. But I don't think we should expect them to come and really get involved in providing the funding. They can do experimental funding, they can do some documentational funding and that sort of thing, not actual carrying on the microcredit program. That has to be done by somebody else. One important role I see the international community, United Nations can do is to collect all those information and put it on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis to the world. Today, the latest score is country A is ahead of country B, and country C is lagging behind. So that, hey, why am I lagging behind? What are we not doing? So you have a website, you can go to details and find out what is happening in our neighborhood. Providing that information is much more powerful than dishing out money. But nobody is providing us any information. I think this is the most important thing to be done. Even in a rudimentary fashion, even if the information is not absolutely precise. So that is the most important thing to do. Unless we do that, unless we can measure, unless we can count, we cannot achieve. So that's as simple as that. The World Bank, as a financial institution, didn't go very far on supporting microcredit. If you look at their statistics, World Bank lends out $20 billion a year or something. Not even 1% of that money each year goes into microcredit. So you can see their priorities and importance they assign to that. And whatever money they have given in a big way in what we might call the mainstreaming in microcredit. One big example is their support to Bangladesh in wholesale fund. Bangladesh wholesale fund was working and doing very good job, and World Bank wanted to support that institution. They provided a big chunk of money, $150 million to begin with. So that was one good point where money coming from the World Bank used very appropriately and very successfully. But my question is, if you could have this experience in Bangladesh, how good it worked, why World Bank stopped at doing it elsewhere? They did it in Pakistan, but did it in a very different way than it's happened in Bangladesh. They have not in any other country that I know of. One of the things initiated by the World Bank was the creation of CGAP, Consultative Group to Assist the Poorest. And we were behind it, supporting it to kind of a platform for all the donors, because I was thinking that donors don't understand what microcredit is. CGAP, as it went on its work, it concentrated more on academic exercises, studies, norms, rules, procedures, probably because they work with the donors, so they wanted to create some norms for the donors, but actual work was not helped very much by CGAP itself. One tension they created recently by changing their name, which was Consultative Group to Assist the Poorest. They thought it would be wise for them to change the name to Consultative Group to Assist the Poor rather than the poorest. So change from poorest to the poor. And their explanation is poorest don't need credit because they cannot handle credit. So we should be looking at the poor, the particularly upper part of the poor who can handle money. So I thought that was absolutely against the intention of the creation of SIGAP. And since that time, I think they have lost the touch of the ground level reality of microcredit completely. To achieve the 2015 goal, first requirement, first thing that we must do, understand that it's a global task. It's not the task of the government, it's not task of United Nations, it's not task of one particular group of donors or others. Everybody is involved. Institutions, individuals, organizations, businesses, everybody must feel that this is our task and pick up their own piece. How do we contribute and do that? We have to define the task itself. Unless we can describe this in a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis, we cannot proceed. Because if I don't know how much I have proceeded and how much path I have left, how much distance to cover, I'm not energized. It's not a money story. Donors cannot come and buy Millennium Development Goals. Donors can only support governments and people's initiative to reach that. So this is a human effort. It's more than the money effort. When you come to the village level, because that's where the real action is. Real action is not at the United Nations, which is global. When you go at that level, everything gets blurred. You don't know what's happening really. So the real person-to-person thing is at the village level or at the unit level in the city or a block level in the city, whatever level you have the primary level in all existence. And then see how many poor people there are. You list them. Because poor people are not like an abstract entity. They are real people. And then we create an imaginary roadmap. How from point this to next year at this point, next year, following year, and then finally we made it. So each year's journey has been described. Then we divide it up in each month's journey, each week's journey, each day's journey. And then follow it up. What actually we're doing and kind of plot it out so that we know we are making it or we're not making it. I have not seen that any citizens group could combine themselves. We are the citizens to achieve Millennium Development Goals. None. So if citizens don't feel this is important, government will not feel it's important. So that's where the citizens' roles are. If we can combine, we say we are for ensuring the achievements of Millennium Development Goals. We want to do it. If we can make that kind of a spirit as a citizens, then it will become real. Then it's not just bureaucrats sending notes to each other. What have you done? Here is our report, glorious report. We are making all the efforts. You know, it's a country with lots of difficulties. You must understand our reality, ground reality. It doesn't really happen the way you think we should. But we are making all the efforts. We have spent so much money. We created this cell. We have done this. Look at this beautiful package that we have. That's it. It will be limited in that ping pong games, old ping pong that you write reports, I send reports and make a presentation, that's it. Not the real on-ground thing, unless people themselves become involved in that to say, yes, we want. So this is what the citizens' role is. Citizens to form those kind of, activate those institutions and form their own lobby group, pressure group, and action groups to make it happen. The world is changing. Not today. It has been changing ever since it was here. But the speed of change in human society is getting faster and faster and faster. We come to the second half of the last century, 20th century, and we see suddenly the speed became still faster. And we come to the last decade of the last century, we see that speed is phenomenal. Human society will be changing faster than ever before in the history of mankind. The question is, with those changes, where do we end up? 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now. So this is a question everybody should be asking themselves, because 50 years is a long, long time in the fast-moving world. So this is the chance that we have to think ahead. Because unless we can imagine, we cannot create. So I think it's a very concrete thing. All we have to do, believe in it and work for it. And it will happen. And it will happen faster than we can imagine. And that will be the day when we can all agree that we have to create museums, poverty museums. Because our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren would like to know about poverty because they're reading about in the history, but they don't see it around. So in order to let them understand what poverty used to be like, so we have to create poverty museums. And when our children, our grandchildren will be visiting those poverty museums, they will hate us. They will hate their predecessors, because the earlier generations tolerated this inhuman conditions for fellow human beings. So that's a basic thing. We must imagine what it would be like in 2050 or 2030 or 2020. And then let us work together to make it happen. And if we imagine things, agree on that, it will happen, because we are the one who run this show. So if we decide this is the kind of world we want, it will be poverty-free world, there's no other escape. We did something wrong and the poverty is created. So let's do something right so that poverty disappears.
Mohammed Yunus is the founder of Grameen Bank. Grameen loans money for self-employment to over 4 million poor women in Bangladesh.
You cannot get a dollar without a dollar in your hand. The poor people, nobody gives the first dollar to catch the next dollar.
Dr. Yunus designed Grameen to serve people who have no collateral. 5 borrowers form a group and guarantee each other's loans. The repayment rate is greater than 98%. More than half of Grameen's members have moved their families out of poverty.
We have demonstrated beyond anybody's doubt that it works and is sustainable. and it can work in all kinds of cultural and economic situations.
Grameen Bank has become a model for hundreds of microfinance programs around the world, serving tens of millions of the world's poorest citizens. In this program, Dr. Yunus shares the experience and insights gained in his struggle to build the world's leading poor people's bank.
I toyed around several alternatives. Finally, I decided maybe I should link them with the local bank. Bank is the one who should be lending money. This is their business. This is their job. So with enthusiasm, I go to the branch manager or the bank manager who is located in the campus, propose to him that he lend money to the poor people in the village. He fell from the sky. He couldn't believe I even said that. He said, no, it can't be done. It can't be done. I said, why not? Because, he said, poor people are not creditworthy. What does creditworthy mean? Creditworthy means he will not be able to pay back. I said, how do you know? Did you lend them at all? He said, no, I never lent them. I said, how do you know? I said, everybody knows that. Because they are poor, no matter how much money you give, they will eat and the money will be over. They can't pay you back. So I went to higher officials in the city, downtown. I talked to them. They said the same thing. So every time I go and see somebody, they tell me the same thing. And it went on for months. I couldn't find the door to open. Then I learned something from them and I used it. I said, why don't you accept me as a guarantor? I become your guarantor. I sign all your documents. Risk is on me, not on you. You give the money. I thought it's such a straightforward proposal, they will immediately go for it. They didn't. In all, there were more than 6 months. Finally, I was accepted as a guarantor. And it worked. I was very excited that it worked. But the bank manager doesn't change his mind. He said it may work in one village, but if you do it in 2 villages, it will never work. I said, okay, let me do it in 2 villages. So I did it in 2 villages, it worked. He said, well, 1 village and 2 villages are the same thing. Maybe you should do it in 5 villages. So I did it in 5 villages. It worked. But he doesn't change his mind. After I have done this several rounds, and I realized that if I do the whole world, he's not going to change his mind. Maybe I should forget about him. So I thought maybe I should have a separate bank doing exactly what I'm doing. And that idea started haunting me. That why don't I have a bank for the poor people?
Grameen Bank is best known for bringing the power of microfinance to over 4 million poor women in Bangladesh. But it has also created more than 24 other ventures.
Whether non-profit or for-profit, our involvement relates to benefiting to the poor people.
Muhammad Yunus, Grameen Bank's founder, describes why and how Grameen has launched enterprises in areas as diverse as textiles, cell phone technology, and healthcare. He shares the valuable lessons he has learned in finding new ways to give Grameen's members even greater access to opportunity and power.
We need a very different structure, different framework, different reference points. We would be judged by our own achievements.
Dr. Yunus sees a global need for a new kind of capitalism, one that puts people in need first. He demonstrates how economic viability can magnify the impact of social ventures. And he describes the support systems needed to allow this new model of capitalism to reach its vast potential.
Since capitalism is narrowly interpreted, socially conscious people don't want to get involved in business because that's uninteresting for them. That's not what we want. We don't want to make money. We want to do something else. So they are outside the business purview. I'm saying if you open it up, a lot of people will gradually come in, particularly young people. who are looking for things to do in the world, contribute in the world, and solve problems in the world. They will dream of becoming a social business entrepreneurs, and the facilities has to be created so that they become social business entrepreneur. And I'm talking about even creating departments. There are business schools producing MBAs. There will be a social business program in the business school which will be creating social MBAs. And then you need another institution to make it happen, like you have the stock markets. And the existing stock market, people go there to make more money, as simple as that. You don't go there for charity. So if I want to do good to people in a business way, I have nowhere to go. So I said, why don't we create a completely separate stock exchange where all the companies which are doing good to people, the social business enterprises, will be listed. It could be women's empowerment, it could be street children, it could be drinking water, it could be arsenic problem in some place, it could be pollution problem in another place, it could be healthcare program in some place, it could be health insurance for poor people, whatever. There's 101 and 1001 ideas that you can bring and run those things in a business way, provided the investors who would like, I cannot run a company like that, but I would like to invest in one. I have the money and I can spend it. If we have to run a social business enterprise right now, we run into a lot of problems because we have not set up supportive institutions alongside. So we would be depending a lot more on the old institutions, and they will be at each stage questioning our norms, or they will not understand our performance statistics and so on. If you are not making profit, why should I come and support you? Why should I lend money to you? You are not making any profit. How are you going to pay us back? But doesn't mean that you have to be out of the market completely. It means that you are the first one to venture into new territory and you lead the way and others will follow you and create institutions. This is how the pioneers always did. Be the first one, stick the neck out and make it happen. Luckily, already if you look around the world, there are many, many, more than we can think, are social business entrepreneurs. So there will be initial problems, but if it sticks, if it grows, you can create your own world.
Transparency International is a citizen-based organization that creates tools, coalitions, and campaigns to fight corruption locally, nationally, and globally.
In some countries, whole generations of young people are being lost because their parents cannot afford the bribes which are being demanded.
Transparency International has pioneered the worldwide creation of legal frameworks to combat corruption, and works tirelessly with global partners and more than 90 national chapters to enforce them. Peter Eigen is its creator.
What has happened during the last 5 years is breathtaking. So in a way we have a window of opportunity of a couple of years.
In this program, Peter Eigen describes the terrible toll that corruption takes in the lives of millions of people. How social, political, and legal breakthroughs offer great hope of neutralizing it, and how everyone can join the growing campaign to eliminate one of humanity's greatest injustices.
Of course, a precondition of having an energetic fight against corruption is that there is a awareness among the people, among the decision makers, that corruption is extremely dangerous and that something has to be done about it. And one of our most important tools in this area has been the global index which we produce every year, the Corruption Perception Index. This is an index in which we rank countries by the perception of thousands of people who are being questioned by independent opinion surveys, last year by 17 independent surveys, about their perception of how important corruption is in a given country. This list has become a major tool. In fact, it is expected with some anxiety by some countries and is always put on the front page of many important media and has been like a miraculous tool to put our agenda on center stage in the world. We have been criticized that this is somewhat one-sided. In particular, Prime Minister Mahathir of Malaysia criticized us that this looks only at the perceived corruption by the recipients of bribes, and that therefore naturally the third world looks worse than basically the hand that gives and offers the bribes. And I think he is right. This was indeed a bias which is built in the Corruption Perception Index, but we had no data on the perceived corruption of the companies coming from various countries in the exporting world. And therefore we had to develop our own survey, and we have done this, and that is our Bribe Payers Index. It was a very revealing instrument, which by the way also ranked various sectors in accordance with their perceived vulnerability to bribery, where the construction sector is the worst, arms trade and arms and military supplies is the second, then comes the energy sector. It's sort of instinctively the right order, and has helped us to deal with some of the issues in these sectors more effectively. There has been a criticism that if we only measure perceptions, it is a rather impressionistic, subjective criterion, which may be very unfair. It is practically impossible to prove corruption cases, and therefore it is futile to try to simply measure actual corruption, proven corruption. Therefore, we simply had to take a proxy for this, and that proxy is what educated people, what victims of corruption, what participants in corrupt deals, what they perceive to be the corruption in a given situation. And we found that is an extremely important proxy which helped us to paint an image of the reality. Perceptions are very important, but because of the weaknesses we have also begun to apply some other methods, in particular in surveys which are done within countries. So we had surveys within Mexico, within Peru, within Kenya, for instance. Household surveys asking people how much money does your family have to pay every year for bribes. How often are you asked for a bribe? Did you pay bribes yourself? And so on. And based on these surveys, we have started a new tool which we call the Corruption Barometer, which this year has quite a number of countries listed. So building awareness is a tremendously important starting point for fighting corruption. And that awareness, of course, has tremendously changed in the last, I would say, 5 years.
In greater and greater numbers, citizens groups the world over are using entrepreneurial vision and skills to solve some of the world's most difficult problems.
We've gone from 5,000 to over 1 million in Brazil in 20 years. In the U.S., we went from 464,000 in 1990 to 1.1 million a dozen years later.
Bill Drayton is the founder of Ashoka, Innovators for the Public, a global organization that stands at the vanguard of the emerging citizen sector. In this program, he describes the sector's rapid rise and its profound implications for everyone.
The companies that get this are going to have a huge competitive advantage. Those that fall behind are just going to be blindsided.
He shows how business people, social activists, teachers, and students can become part of this powerful new movement for social good. Once in a very rare while in history, there is a
fundamental pattern change. We're in the middle of one of those changes right now, and that's what Ashoka is here to serve. To understand it, one has to go back in history a little. Rome to 1700, no growth in per capita income. Then in the next century, 20%, the next century, 200, and in the last century, 740% growth in per capita income in the West. Business took off around 1700 with a new architecture. Radical change. Anyone could start a new idea. They would gain market share if they succeeded, respect, money. Other people would copy them. A positive dynamic got underway. Business became entrepreneurial and competitive. That set in motion a compounding process of productivity growth. This didn't happen in the social sector. The money came through taxes, paid for the canals, schools, welfare system. Too easy, no pressure for change. Moreover, the money came through government, a series of monopolies, and no monopoly in any sector can tolerate competition because they lose. We didn't make the same transformation that the business half of society did. Business compounded productivity, we remained static, we fell behind. We are now at the midpoint of an incredibly quick catch-up transformation of the citizen half. The last 2.5 decades, all across the world pretty much, the sector has flipped to the same entrepreneurial competitive architecture that business has. As a result, we've been gaining productivity very fast. As in business, if you have a better idea, you will gain attention, resources, better people will come, you'll be better placed in the public decision-making process, you and your organization will move ahead. Others will then copy. You better keep inventing. Same dynamic as business. And because it's a catch-up, we didn't have to invent everything, so we've been catching up very fast. I think this is a guesstimate. Our productivity growth is probably 2.5, 3 times that of business for the last 2 decades. So we are, in other words, cutting the productivity gap in half every 10 to 12 years. When you do that, of course, resources flow into the sector. And that's what we've seen. The number of citizen groups has multiplied. We've gone from 5,000 to over 1 million in Brazil in 20 years. In the U.S., we went from 464,000 in 1990, recognized by the Internal Revenue Service, to 1.1 million a dozen years later. Slovakia went from 10 or 12 to 10,000 in 9 years once the wall came down. Employment rates growing at 2-3 times as fast in the countries where you can measure that. So this has been an extraordinary catch-up, a one-time change in the architecture of half of society. In any historical sense, this level, this depth of profound, broad change is unprecedented.